Okay, I'll call this special regional council meeting of May 26th to order. Please be advised that today's meeting is being recorded and streamed on a publicly accessible website. Are there any CAO additions?
No, Mayor, just with the exception, I'll do some COVID updates after Aaron does the EOC update.
Okay, I have no additions. Any councilor additions?
I have one. I just would like to quickly discuss the Plant That Seed program, where we plant that seed program.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Souls.
Thank you.
No other additions. I'll ask for a motion to adopt the minutes of the special regional council meeting of May 8th, special regional council meeting of May 12th, and the special regional council meeting of May 19th. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Gerwin, seconded by Councillor Roper. All those in favor? Carried. Business arising, emergency operations summary, report number 3. Mrs. Laval.
Thank you, Mayor. As the report indicates, most of the work on the EOC is going around the reestablishment of local government services in line with any of the guidelines that are being handed down from the province and WorkSafe BC. We did a bit of an assessment of Town Hall late last week just to figure out what a front counter would look like with the requirements from WorkSafe BC for a barrier between employees and members of the public. On the outreach aspect, the Plant the Seed program is going ahead, and there was some work last week with some seniors to help develop the garden that have not been used for a bit of time at Grace Manor. As well, there was a bit of an announcement with the food bank in terms of the donation of local produce and the encouragement of people to donate a row of their gardens to the food bank when that particular produce comes into season. I believe it's been reported as well also to council, but Central Mountain Air has now put back that their return to scheduled service is scheduled for July 7th.
Thank you, Mrs. Laval. Mr. Berry, is there anything to add?
Possible correction with CMA, which Aaron wasn't aware of, but we're just working to that now. It's looks like their return to service is limited return to service, so limited meaning not returning the service to the Fort Nelson Airport until possibly August 7th or 8th, somewhere around there. We're just confirming that they initially reported limited service, and then they clarified what that limited service is. So,
Mrs. McIver, is that what you wanted to bring forward? Okay, we'll hear from Mr. Berry and then we'll go back to you.
Just some updates for council. So the town hall reopening to the public, we're still targeting June 1st, which is next Monday. As Aaron had mentioned, we're working towards meeting the requirements from WorkSafe in terms of physical barriers or engineered barriers in place to protect the employees when they just meet with or have to serve the public. At this point, we're looking at regular hours of operation with the first hour dedicated to the vulnerable population, so 8:30 to 9:30. The general public only to access the lobby area. We'll obviously have lots of signage and queuing of people as they come in to ensure that the physical distancing is adhered to. We also have occupancy limits that we'll post for each of the various spaces in Town Hall. And just unless there's any concerns of council, just looking for a resolution of council to reopen for regular business hours starting on Monday, unless there's any questions or concerns.
Councillors, can I have a motion on that resolution, please, to open on Monday? Moved by Councillor Penny, seconded by Councillor Gerwin. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. Additionally, we're also looking at, and I'll catch up with councillors in there offline also, but we're looking at targeting sometime mid-June to potentially go back to unless council has any concerns with it, or we're looking at going to start up the regular council meetings, most likely for the June 22nd meeting. So we'll look at that transitioning from the special regional meetings that we currently have, the council meetings, and to go back into the regular meetings. Lots of logistics to work out regarding that still yet in terms of public, and also not sure if council, the various councilors, and again, something I'll catch up with you on in regards to attendance, if want to continue with the virtual attendance, or looking at coming back into the to the Bear Pit for meetings anytime soon. There's no requirement to do this, to have these meetings through a virtual process. It's basically it's based on what council's wishes are as a council, and also individually in terms of what that looks like in terms of returning back to the Bear Pit. But I just wanted to throw out the fact that we're looking at approaching the subject with council in regards to returning to regular meetings, being the second and fourth Monday of each month, or into the summer months, obviously a reduced schedule, and then having special regional council meetings as required if there's pertinent information that needs to be discussed or brought up with council in between the regular meetings. So stay tuned for that one. But any questions or concerns regarding that one, Mayor, Council?
I have none. I'm anxious to get council back around this table as soon as possible. I recognize that there may be some health concerns for people, but I'm anxious to get things back as normal as possible, as soon as possible. I don't know what the rest of council feels like. Anyone else have any comment on this?
I have a comment.
Councilor Gerwin.
So yeah, I'm very much in favor of going to back to the second and the fourth Monday with our regular agendas, including councilor reports, all of that. But I, like everybody else, want to ensure that we do it in a safe manner. And also, I'm very accepting of council people that might still want to attend remotely, as I think we all are. So I think that's a personal decision, and I'm good with whatever anybody else decides.
Councilor Scholes, I believe you were going to say something, but you were muted. So
You
Still are muted.
What happened to you?
no, there you
As
go.
per normal, there we go. I'm in favor of meeting as per normal, but and I just wanted to let you know that you're missing out on something, and I've been hauling cows lately, and if we were sitting at the table, you'd be able to know that without me saying it. So we miss that kind of thing in council. So,
We certainly do.
yes,
We certainly do miss that. I think there's a huge number of benefits to meeting in person. Some of them are difficult to quantify, but I'm looking forward to having everyone back around the table. Any other comments on that? Very well. Staff will be reaching out to us to have some discussions on this. Was there anything else, Mr. Barry?
Yes, and on that topic, we'll be providing some more information. Obviously, the way the meetings occurred previously will not look the same today with the new normal as we continue to hear, obviously having to ensure there's proper physical distancing and spacing in the Bear Pit and maximum occupancy levels and things of that nature. So we're working through that in the background now, and we'll provide that as we move forward with council. And one of the reasons why going back to I'll call it a normal meeting, and for the June 8th one would be challenging in terms of timing. So additionally, we're working on the rec center and public spaces. The potential restart of that. We don't have any firm dates as of yet, mainly because we're still waiting on some guidance and some information from the province. We have started seeing some unofficial or preliminary guidance and requirements, which started to show up yesterday, but again, it is unofficial, waiting for approval of WorkSafe and the various agencies. So as soon as we know more with regards to that, we'll update council. Additionally, just some other notes in terms of updates. BC Parks have confirmed that their campgrounds will be opening on June 1st in the north, which also includes, looks like the Lillard Hot Springs campground, with the exception, of course, the pools, the hot spring pools, and the playgrounds will not be open, but all the campgrounds will be open. And the communication at this point is that they're limiting the camping to BC residents only. With that said, we're reaching out to the, sorry?
hot springs without hot springs.
We'll see how they deal with that from a logistics perspective, but it does give people the opportunity, of course, to camp overnight, and another option for them. So In terms of our own regional campgrounds, we've been monitoring what we've been doing there, and now, of course, working and communicating with the BC Parks. One of the things we're looking at doing here is relaxing some of the restrictions, specifically the reservation-only process with the campgrounds, to allow some ease for the residents to access the campgrounds. We haven't been dealing with any significant volumes of people there or any concerns that way. Even with a nice weekend this past weekend, that we peaked out at about seven campsites that were utilized out of the 25. So to give a bit of an ease of process for the residents to access those campsites, we're looking at reducing the requirement or removing the requirement to a reservation-only process. So I'm looking at for a resolution of council to get, unless there's concerns of council, of course, to just get council's blessing to give staff the flexibility to change that up a little bit and reduce some of those restrictions, including the need to do a reservation-only process.
Can I get a resolution then, council?
I'd like to comment on that first for a second.
very well.
Or ask a question.
Yes, go ahead, Councilor Penny.
So we would just be opening up the parks to just anyone at that point, or would we be restricting them to local residents or BC residents?
At this point, unless council wants to change it, we do not have any restrictions in place in terms of who can reserve and stay at the campsite. So that was based on council's direction. So we would move forward without that. The challenge we would have at both sites, for that matter, if we were to restrict who could stay there, is we'd probably still need to have some sort of reservation process, just because of the way we don't have a camp attendant that attends the Andy Bailey campsite, and then our camp attendant at Tetsa, it's a self-registration process if you weren't to reserve. So some challenges in terms of how to deal with that.
I thought that's why we kind of went to the reservation only for both sites, was kind of a way to restrict on who was going in there without actually restricting who was going in there. But I don't know what to do going forward.
I think we did that before BC Parks announced for BC residents only. And if council decides to stay with the reservation system, I just need you to know that the reservation system doesn't work really well yet. So I think that we would then be having to dedicate some resources to getting a reservation system that works a little bit better than what we're currently doing. If you phone, it's okay if somebody answers the phone. Both times I've tried it, I've received voicemail, and so I have to get phone back, and that's fine. But if you happen to be on the road, or you're staying at Tetsa and you want to stay an extra night, you have to phone to make a reservation to get a spot. So, I mean, there are problems both ways, but.
I think what staff is looking for is a resolution to allow them some flexibility to deal with some of those problems as well, and to loosen the restrictions.
Yeah, and to council, to both points made by Councillor Penny and Councillor Gerwing, when we originally were drafting the information for council to open the campgrounds, we were working with BC Parks to get information from BC Parks. It indicated that June 1st was a potential to open campgrounds. That wasn't confirmed. And then, of course, at the same time, the Hot Springs was communicated to us that campground was not open or wasn't opening, which, of course, has changed since. The thought is that, I mean, we would still monitor the campgrounds to see if there's any issues or concerns, but the thought was that, given the fact that even with those campgrounds currently not open, that we're not seeing any major issues or concerns with crowds at either campground in Andy Bailey or Tetsa. And it's the relaxation of the requirement to do reservations just eases the process a little bit for the person wanting to go camping. Because currently, as Councillor Gerwing said, we're just manning the phone Monday to Friday, and you do have the ability to go into the system, but we are experiencing some challenges with the system, just based on the fact that it wasn't originally designed as a reservation system for the campgrounds, and we just try to make something work to allow to open it up. So it gives us the ability to, and the resident or the user, the ability to utilize the campground a little bit to access a campground a little easier.
So didn't we also put up signage then saying that there was no vacancy that would stop people from just regular highway traffic from going in there, wouldn't it?
That's currently in place. I'm not sure, and again, unless council wishes to keep something like that in place, the thought would be that we would look at potentially removing that also. But again, it's entirely up to council, and if we want to hold, we can provide. If there's concerns that council has, we can provide more information if you wish, and we can just stay status quo for now.
Well, if I can just continue, I mean, we haven't wanted to be a trend setter from the beginning. And even though I want to make these parks as easily accessible and to all our residents as much as possible, if the BC government feels necessary to keep the provincial parks to BC residents only, we know with us being on this major route to Alaska, we do have a lot of out of country guests that are going to go through, and they're continuing to go through daily, and I'm seeing them here in my business almost on a daily basis. So even though we haven't seen much traffic as of yet, but that's, I think, would be due to the fact that we have, no vacancy signs up there, so they're not even going to attempt to go in there. If we remove those and just open it up, with provincial campgrounds being restricted for them not be able to stay in, I think we may be, I don't know, we'd see a flux of them come in. I'm not 100% sure on whether I agree if there's a big concern or not, but at the same time, we have to look at our province and what they're doing going forward and restricting to BC residents only. So it would be nice to follow suit.
I have a tendency to agree with you, Councillor Penny. I think of a family in Fort Nelson that goes to camping at Tetsa River, and they get a campsite next to someone from the United States, and they're nervous and they're concerned about whether or not these people that are traveling up the highways have COVID-19, and it can certainly ruin their camping experience. So I would like to see us try to find some way to mimic what the province is doing and keep it to BC residents only. But I think there's some challenges in that, and that's why I think the resolution to allow administration to tweak this as much as possible to reflect the views of council. Councillor Souls.
Yeah, I think that the provinces, like if you listen to their intent, they're trying to open up as much BC to BCers as possible. And so it seems like we would have to be careful that we don't send the message that we're restricting part of BC from the rest of BC. So how do you do that? They want BC people to be traveling in BC. I've heard them. They've been saying that recently. So we're part of that network. I'd like to see BCers traveling in BC. So I think the need for the flexibility, I realize that the American traveler on their way through, it's a different picture. But BC, as far as not being trendsetters, the government is gingerly trying to find a way to open up as much as they can to the province so that we can have a made in BC tourism season with BC people. So I'd like to see that.
Oh, sorry.
I totally agree, and I wasn't trying to say to restrict to only our residents, but I would definitely like to follow suit with the province. And not only that, I think it's going to be a reduced season anyway. And if with provincial campgrounds being BC residents only, and if we followed suit, then that's going to make it a little bit better for our providers, our private providers in our area, to probably pick up some of that extra work that would probably normally stay in a provincial or a municipal campground. They'll end up at one of our local providers, which would be good for them as well.
Any other comments, councillors? Very well. I'll ask for a motion then to instruct Councillor.
Nope.
Very well.
I'll make that.
A motion to instruct administration to do what they can about ensuring the campgrounds are opened up and hopefully to BC residents. Moved by Councillor Souls.
Yep.
Seconded by
Did we
Councillor
take
Gerwin.
out the word hopefully? Like,
Very well. Okay. I'm sure they will. I'm sure they will word this appropriately, but without putting too fine a point on it.
I would like to see us just restricted to BC residents that's following suit. Now, Mr. Barry had also mentioned that it'd be difficult to do that without keeping the registration system, online registration, which is part of the problem we're trying to get rid of. But I would be happy anyways, at least if we would have to put up signage at the
Yeah.
beginning prior to them leaving the highway, signage saying that this is restricted to BC residents only. We may still have a few Americans that go in and self-register. Well, you know what? That's just, what are we going to do? But at least if we put the signage out there so they don't turn off the highway, prematurely. But I know that we don't have the real ability to police it 100%. Neither does the province really in a lot of the areas. I mean, I'm sure they're going to see it at Muncho Lake and the hot springs. The park attendants are going to come through. The people are already going to be self-registered, at least at Muncho Lake, and they're going to be from out of province. How they're going to deal with that, I don't know, but we'll just have to learn and grow with it, I guess.
They're going to ask for identification. They've already stated that they're asking for identification, and if there isn't somebody with a BC resident identification, then they won't be allowed to camp there. So, I mean, I don't know that we need to do that, but I fully agree 100% BC residents only, and that there be signage at the highway and signage as you're entering, and that our camp attendant, I mean, if somebody pulls in there, I guess, they don't have to stay 10 nights though. You know, it's
No,
like,
but-
okay, you're all set up, but you're going tomorrow morning or whatever.
Yeah.
Mr.
There's so
Berry,
much we can do.
I believe you have a good idea of where council's at with this subject.
Yeah, what we'll do is we'll reconvene and discuss. I mean, we get an idea where council wants to go, and then we'll provide some update back and just ensure that what we are looking at doing meets council's objectives. So we'll bring something else back to council here at the next meeting.
I think council recognizes that this is we don't expect perfection in this, but best efforts. We had a mover of a motion.
I'll
It
second
was
that.
Councillor Souls, seconded by Councillor Penny. All those in favor, please. Carried unanimously.
And then, okay, next, you said for next meeting then? I mean, yeah, never mind. It's all right.
Mrs. McIver, I think I've left you. You had a comment, and
It was.
seems like an hour ago. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I hesitate to say, but we need to adopt the agenda.
Oh, thanks, Ross.
I realize we've moved long past that, but just for the sake.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Penny, seconded by Councillor Roper. All those in favor? I'm sorry.
And before we move on from this report, just want to get an update on the record about our recycling center and when it's opening, and if it's not going to be soon, can we please get some bins at the landfill?
So I noticed on a public forum, the manager of the private depot has indicated they will be open by the end of this week.
That's the date.
Yeah, so that hasn't been formally communicated, but I did notice there was some dialogue in a public forum, and that was what the owner indicated, so. Yeah.
I've got one other thing in this COVID area as well. You had
Go ahead,
mentioned,
Councillor Penny.
you had mentioned, Mr. Berry, that, working towards the rec center and that sort of thing, but outdoor venues, so such as the baseball diamonds, that's part of that. Are we expecting that to be middle of June or so as well?
Yeah, in terms of a date, can't give you a date, but we're still all of that. So any outdoor spaces, if it's playgrounds, tennis courts, the ball diamonds, et cetera, are included. And of course, the rec facility itself, in terms of what that looks like for a potential reopen, which most likely would be a phased approach also. And we received some information late yesterday from unofficial information that's from the BC Recs and Parks Association, I believe that's where they were from. And we're just they had indicated that this is some initial information. However, it was getting vetted through the province for their review and approval. So again, it's unofficial at this point. So we don't really have a good date. We're just waiting for more information in terms of what that looks like at this point.
I mean, I can totally understand with the rec center, but as for the outdoor spaces, I mean, I know that other communities, even in our neck of the woods, have they didn't even close, like Fort St. John didn't close their skate park or their tennis courts or basketball courts and that sort of thing. So I'm just wondering if there's any way that we could at least get on a track to open those outdoor spaces. I can totally understand, and with the rec center, it's going to be a whole different animal with getting that figured out. But with the outdoor spaces, I'd really like to see us get those moved forward as soon as possible.
And we are. I mean, just this morning, again, contact with the rec center the staff to contact and communicate with to see if there's any specific guidance or what's occurring. We are aware of some other organizations that have allowed, and if council wish to give direction and say open them, then we would communicate that upwards in terms of who we deal with and look at what was the best approach from in terms of signage and liability perspective. It's interesting. The province indicated that obviously they didn't. There's no mandate or requirement to shut these spaces down, but at the same time they're releasing requirements on how to open them, right? Which is the interesting dynamic. We were never told to shut town hall down. It was a direction as a safe precautionary measure with council. However, significant requirements to open it or keep it open also. So similarly with the outdoor spaces, some organizations have just simply hung a sign saying use at your own risk and ensure you wash your hands, et cetera, et cetera.
So would a motion then from us make it easier then for you to move forward at opening up the outdoor spaces? Is that what you're saying?
Council, I mean, it's a bit of a chicken and egg syndrome. So obviously, we're working as fast as we can, but at the same time, there's it comes down to potential risk. We don't have any good understanding of exactly what should be done based on the requirements or even the recommendations of the province, because that hasn't been provided yet. With that being said, if we went to open today, we could. And we would sign it to the best of our abilities and get as much information as we could, but it doesn't mean that we would have to change what we do. I mean, it comes down to what risk is council wishing or willing to accept, and without specific guidance. So, and we're quite aware that there's been some organizations that actually didn't even shut down playgrounds, right?
And then other ones filled them full of gravel so nobody could use their skateboards. So we have definitely both ends of the spectrum. But,
yeah.
Let me get some other comments from some other councillors here. Councillor Penny. Anyone else have any comments on the opening of these areas?
Yeah, I would like to see us opening them up. The golf course is operating. They're having their barbecues with 50 people allowed in their clubhouse. They're allowing 6 people to be at a table. They've following whatever guidelines that they've been given. School is beginning next week. So yeah, I think with the proper signage, but that being said, I don't want to see council give direction to staff that's going to send them off in another direction if they've got a path charted to reopen all of these facilities. I don't want us to, like that squirrel, okay, we're giving you this direction. Now you got to stop everything you're doing here and take care of this because council's made a resolution. So that's how I feel.
Mr. Berry.
So it is a priority at the top of our list. The direction that, unless council has any concerns, I mean, and it's probably good to pass a resolution to open as quickly as we can, and that doesn't, which allows us or enables us, as if we receive that guidance and direction from the province, then we don't need to come back to council and say let's open it. We can just communicate they're open. For example, in terms of golf course, the golf course has been given specific guidelines in terms of how to operate safely, as have a lot of businesses. The province just released yesterday an updated mass gatherings order, which has clarified some other aspects. I mean, i.e. at the golf course, you can have an event of 50 people plus the workers, which wasn't clarified previous to this order. So all these things are continuing to be updated, rolled down the pipe. So with regards to the outdoor spaces, it's just wanting to ensure that we're doing the right thing based on the recommendation to the province. If council wants to pass a resolution to proceed as quickly as possible and allow us to open without having to come back to council against that resolution, then I would recommend that occurring. And again, outside of that, the signage is a piece that, what's the appropriate signage, and also we're working in conjunction with with First Nations, Fort Nelson First Nations, in terms of that approach, is they're looking for similar guidance with their outdoor spaces too, of course. Right, so.
Any other comments, councilors? Hearing none, Mr. Penny, would you like to make a motion?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we open these outdoor rec facilities as soon as possible, given the following all the guidelines and such as Mr. Berry had just stated.
Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councilor Gerwing. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Admin report number 39, Ms. Vandersteen, tourism update.
Hello, Mayor and Council. So this was just provided to you as for information. There's been a lot going on in the background, so not much obviously out on the streets and activity-wise for tourism, but we did do our planned trade shows before COVID-19 really hit in. And obviously people aren't really going to be traveling much for this summer, but I think it is a positive activity still for encouragement, and for people that are now planning for future trips, especially the lower mainland is probably going to be planning road trips versus trips even into 2021, where flying is going to be still probably restricted, or just not, as people aren't going to be as comfortable doing big flying trips, which makes our road trips look good for the next couple years. And then I wanted to provide some information on the conversations and the research and the planning that's happening at a variety of levels, tourism levels, BC regionally, as well as Destination Canada, just to keep track of what's happening, where we need to be paying attention, what the timing might be like for starting those communications. And then the communication that's coming forward in the next couple weeks probably is information to the local residents, as that's going to be the first people that can start to take advantage or utilize our tourism operators locally. So right this second, North Destination BC is promoting Explore BC Local, so that's local residents getting out in a safe and manageable way, keeping lots of distance still between people, but starting to explore our own backyards again. And then looking forward from there, the hyper local, so our own region, and then community to community a few weeks down the road, and then BC wide after that. So just for information, and if anybody has any questions.
Do you have any questions for Ms. Vandersteen?
I
Councilor
don't have a
Penny.
question, but I've got a comment. I think we're very fortunate to get to take part in these two trade shows that we did in Lower Mainland, and we really hit home with a lot of residents down there, showing that northern route that Northern BC Tourism has been, coming up the Alaska Highway and down to Cassiar, doing that loop. It was surprising how many people had no idea that route was there and how excited they were about it. So hopefully we'll see some dividends from it as this year and years going forward.
Yeah, on that.
Your comments.
Well, just to add to that little piece, so we are being very careful about communications related to that right now, even as we do open up to BC wide travel, because the Yukon does have a roadblock at the Yukon border, so people are not able to complete that circle loop at this time until the Yukon border is opened up to BC travelers that are considered non-essential. So yeah, it's something that we're watching and being careful about, as there has been BC and Alberta residents that have thought that they could make the loop and they've been turned around at the border. So we're aware and careful on how we promote things going through this tricky period.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. I think, we need to promote tourism as much as possible. And I know on some of these Zoom meetings, one of the items that comes up is the impact of the lack of tourism on people who depend on tourism. And so we continue to advocate on behalf of them for assistance from the government during this time. Very well. Council information package of May 20th, received for information. New business items, Councillor Souls, plant the seed.
Yeah, just heads up on the tiny little bit of history on the community gardens and so on. First of all, the community garden has established its own society now, the Community Garden Society for Fort Nelson. So there's a contact point, a direct contact point now through which we can connect with the community gardens. It's a really great thing what is going on in the NRRM's participation in the administering this seed to this Plant That Seed program and arranging for soil for gardens, and that is all well received. Just one thing that was brought to my attention, and it's over the last several years, it's been a growing problem, and that is that the interaction between the wildlife and the gardens is getting very difficult to manage. And so I was going to suggest that we have our staff, as in the capacity of working with promoting locally grown and so on, as they're working with that, to contact the Garden Society and start researching what it would take to create the barriers that are needed, like whether we need tall fences or venison in the marketplace somewhere, or some way of dealing with this, because it's a serious enough problem that it's great to be promoting the growing of food in our community gardens. But my understanding is that last year there was at least a third of the food that was eaten by the deer. So I don't know if there's a way of dealing with that, but that's what we need to find out. Any other comments on that?
I haven't heard any comments about wildlife eating the produce in there, but if it's a concern, I think maybe we should look into it. Councillor Gowan?
Yeah, I've heard a lot of comments that it is a concern for sure. People did lose considerable amount last year. But is this something that would fall under our Wild Safe program, Councillor Souls? And can we maybe utilize that service?
Yes, Wild Safe seems to work one way, and that is it protects the deer's right to have its free access to wherever it wants. In fact, we know people, some very well, who've been received citations for having dogs that chase or perceived to chase deer and so on. So the deer are well protected, but the gardens aren't well protected. See, there is no way I see that as a bit of a complication. If you'll notice, say the Midtown Garden has a fence all the way around it. That fence was a donation from an individual when the garden was established. It's too bad that we didn't know that it needed to be 8 feet tall at the time. And but the other garden, of course, is on the Catholic Church property. So I don't know whether they would be amenable to or interested in discussing. I just know that a starting point, if we don't, we're getting involved by being suppliers of dirt and promoting. So if we want to leave it at that, that's fine. And the society itself can research what it can do to to find a way to mitigate the deer issue. And that includes dealing with wildlife. I really don't know a way forward on this as far as jurisdiction.
Well,
Mr. Barry?
go ahead.
I guess from our perspective, our experience with Wild Safe and dealing with the wildlife attractant piece, if there's a garden, if it's a community garden or even one in your own backyard, if it attracts wildlife, then it's the responsibility of who puts that garden in to ensure that the wildlife don't have the ability to get into the garden. And as Councillor Soul says, essentially it's the wild safe's involvement would be around the education piece, and then the conservation officer's involvement would be ensuring that if there's anything that would attract wildlife, so if deer like to eat lettuce, then we have to be able to protect the lettuce from being eaten by deers. So it depends on who would be responsible and what council wishes us to would want staff to do. But the reality is that what could happen is if there's a concern with wildlife attending a garden, then the conservation officer especially has the from provincial regulations has the ability to require that area to be protected if it's electric fencing or proper fencing in terms of height, etc.
Councillor Goering?
No, I'm good, thanks.
Okay, any other comments on this? Very well, okay, thank you. Yes.
So just to confirm, so at this point, there's no resolution to council to direct staff to do anything. So I'm not sure. I know Councillor Souls mentioned a couple of things. So if the lack of any resolution or direction were to do nothing in my assumption at this point, unless council wishes to provide some direction.
Councillor Souls?
I don't think it's appropriate to do a resolution at this time. I think that more conversation between the individuals that are involved, the ones who are identifying it as an issue, and I think that we can do without council's direction, without tying council or staff up with this. I think it's fine for now. We'll figure out something else.
Okay, well, thank you for bringing that up, Councillor Souls, and we'll keep an eye on this, and perhaps in the future there will be a requirement for a resolution, and we'll move that way, but at least we're aware of the situation anyway. Thank you. Moving on. Can I get a motion to move to a closed in-camera meeting, please, under section 91C, 91I, and 91K, and section 92B of the Community Charter? Moved by Councillor Roper, seconded by Councillor Penny. And we are in a closed meeting. Thank you.